to me that if you're Xi Jinping, absolute dictator, you try and do something like that and just don't care about whatever impact it would have on the Chinese people. You try to hope that China can come out with some kind of technology like AI that makes it the dominant player and save the economy that way.
Correct.
Or you just throw it all out and launch a war on Taiwan.
Well, I mean, you could also try to dupe, Wall Street into pumping.
I don't know if that's like really
more money
on the table.
I mean, I think they're going to try. I don't know if they can.
You could try that, but the institutional resistance now is pretty. It's at the highest level it's ever been. There's no new duping going on. There certainly won't be passive flows set up. There will be discussions of those passive flows being severed, and the institutional community now realizes that having to discount no audits, Xi Jinping risk, the potential risk of war, no rule of law, like all those things are pretty bad. And if you're going to just think about this, if you're an institutional investor, and if you're especially a pension, if you're an ERISA-based investor, if you're a pension plan manager, you're held to a higher standard. It's called the prudent man rule. So your sense of fiduciary duty and obligation is actually much higher. And so now that you know everything you know, and if your option is we can invest where there is a rule of law, where there is growth, where there is respect for human rights, where you don't have to discount the leader deciding, well, post-secondary education, take that sector out. We're not doing that, which she did. If you're going to invest in another nation where you have to discount all those things, your implicit necessary rate of return has to be much higher. And if you invested in China's largest index, let's call it 18 years ago, you invested in the Shanghai Shenzhen 300. They've grown their GDP 505% in 18 years. How have you done if you plowed all your money into their stock market over that same period of time? You've lost a third of your money. So let me get this straight. We invested in Chinese companies 18 years ago, and the Chinese government grew their economy 500%, and I still got my ass whipped? Like, how is that even possible? So you need a return, an expected return much higher to discount all those risks. And that message has been given across the US today. And these institutional managers, I mean, of course, there are a few that don't feel that way. But writ large, that's how they feel.
So the BlackRock kind of triple your investments in China, that's not really the game anymore?
Oh my God. Some people are impossible and they're able to stop. I had this like out of body experience with Schwarzman. I got a call and said, I need you to be at a lunch in New York City. And it was from the Secretary of State. I said, Roger that, I'll be there. And you get there and it's a round table and they're name cards. And I see that my name card is next to Schwarzman. And I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be a fun lunch. And the Secretary of State opened the lunch and he said, I'd like to have each person here introduce themselves and give 2 minutes on where you think the U.S.-China relationship is today and where. And he went clockwise. So he intentionally hit Schwarzman before he hit me. And when he was talking, Schwarzman said, China's misunderstood. Now, mind you, this is in Trump 1 at the end. So this is the end of Trump 1's administration back then. So take your mind space back to that day. And Schwarzman said, China is just being misunderstood. He says, the hardliners are running the place. He says, but you really need to listen to the reformers. The reformers are the up and comers. They're coming through. And what we need to do is meet them halfway. We need to not be so punitive on China. We need to meet them halfway and welcome them in some more. And then the secretary looked at me and said, Kyle, and I said, all right, well, I'm just curious. How do we, so we should just let them take 500,000 Uyghurs and put in concentration camps. Should we let them just steal 200 billion a year instead of 400 billion of IP? I'm curious how we meet them halfway. And he took his napkin out of his lap, put it on the table, and he left. not engage in the conversation. And by the way, yes, I went at him, but let's talk about these gorillas that are in the room. right? Because Wall Street's never forced to talk about them, right? They're chasing the next RMB or shekel or whatever they're chasing in China at the end of it's this like pot at the end of this rainbow of 1.4 billion people. They can't wait to figure out how to harness the profits there. And what China's so good at is creating cheerleaders like Ray Dalio, like Schwartzman, like, they give special access as a way to create someone that says, oh, you just don't understand. Like, I'm making all this money. I'm doing amazingly well. So when you create cheerleaders like that, you create champions that are going to go lobby for you in the US. And then everybody else gets fleeced. So you create a few people that you allow to win so that everybody else loses. And that's China's genius at doing that.
It's almost like a pyramid shape.
It's genius because you know what I'm talking about. Special access to a market is analogous to bribery, right? If you're the only one in with a license, well, that's interesting, And if you're the only firm that's able to build a Chinese presence because they happen to like you, but not everyone else, and then you become the soothsayer. I mean, people listen to you because you're a billionaire and you run a big company. And well, hell, if it's working for you, it's got to work for me, and that's just not the case.
Yeah, even the idea of the 1.4 billion people, like they may not have 1.4 billion people.
That's true, and almost 1 billion of them are still in abject poverty.
Yep.
I mean, I think I'm kind of encouraged hearing you say this because those people are often the loudest voices in, when you look at American media, what they're reporting on,
like Bloomberg.
Like China financially, Bloomberg, whatever. Reuters had a story yesterday related to the PBOC thing where it was talking about how, because of the U.S.'s chaotic tariff, management or whatever, like investors are fleeing the dollar and going to, the euro and Asian assets. And then there are people who are like, that's not true at all. But like, why is Reuters saying this? It's hard to gauge what's actually happening.
Yeah. What I think is really important, especially about the dollar, the people that take you back and say, didn't we learn anything in Smoot-Hawley? Okay. Like, throw the flag. In Smoot-Hawley days, we were a surplus driven economy. We ran a trade surplus with every single counterparty that we had. We were not a deficit producing nation. So invariably, if you're going to impose tariffs when you're running surpluses, it is going to decimate your economy. If you are the largest deficit producing country in the world from a balance of trade perspective and you institute tariffs, it will certainly help your economy. And in this case, it's analogous to a currency devaluation. So we knew when we said we're going to go 10% across the board with everyone, because we ran $1.2 trillion in a trade deficit on trade, and we run about a $250 billion services surplus. So let's say we're just running about $1 trillion of trade deficits. Our move for 10% across the board, we knew would drop the dollar 10%, which is about what happened. We knew that was a de facto currency devaluation, and what that's going to do from an external revenue perspective is bring in about $300 billion in an external revenue account. So that will help us with our fiscal deficit a little bit. So I believe Trump's not great at communicating what I just communicated to you. That is certainly the plan. And then with China, it's a very different situation because they are a state actor acting uneconomically to put some of our businesses out of business, and we have to defend ourselves there. So that's a different bucket of tariffs. But the across-the-board tariff was a 10% currency movement, and we knew it was coming.
That was just one clip from our hour-long podcast. I invite you to watch the whole thing at our community platform, ChinaUncensored.tv. We rely on your support to keep making this podcast, so join us and you'll get all the full-length podcasts, audio downloads, exclusive live streams, and lots more stuff. So go to ChinaUncensored.tv and subscribe. I'll see you there.